Daughter murders mother over same-sex love shocks New Zealand. Hello. When talking about contemporary mystery writers, many people instantly think of Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie, authors whose masterpieces have captivated readers for generations. Most of their works have been adapted for the screen, often with additional elements, like seasoning added to enhance a dish's flavor. Today's story, however, centers on a different mystery writer. On May 26, 1938, a little girl named Ivan Park was born in Christchurch, New Zealand. Typically, the birth of a new life signifies joy and fortune for a family. However, this wasn't quite the case for the Park family. Rather than joy, there was an underlying sense of worry in their eyes. Before Ivan's birth, Herbert Ripley and Herona Park already had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. Ivan became the 4th and youngest in the family. A quick note here. Herbert and Herona were not legally married, so all the children bore their mother's surname, Park. Upon hearing worry, one might first assume financial difficulties, which indeed played a role but was not the main reason for their anxiety. The strange part, unknown to others, was that while Herbert and Herona were not biologically related, their children had consistently been born with congenital or intellectual disabilities. Before Ivan was born, they had already been fervently praying that she would be healthy. Yet it seemed the heavens were deaf to their plea. Ivan was frail and sickly from birth, afflicted by various serious ailments like her siblings. At age 5, Ivan suffered from osteomyelitis, an infection that nearly claimed her life. Though she survived after timely treatment, it left her partially disabled in her arms and legs. While she didn't need a wheelchair, her physical limitations kept her from joining in school sports, leaving her without friends before she entered middle school. This solitude nurtured an increasingly introverted personality, a situation that worried her mother. But just when her mother was concerned that Ivan's lack of socialization might affect her future, a light at the end of the tunnel appeared. In 1952, after graduating from junior high, Ivan enrolled in a girls' school in Christchurch to continue her high school education. There, she met Juliet, a person who would go on to change her life. Juliet, Ivan's classmate, also kept to herself, and one day in gym class, Ivan noticed Juliet sitting alone by the field, watching the others play. Uncharacteristically drawn to her, Ivan approached Juliet and asked if something was wrong with her health. Initially, Juliet was focused on the field, but she turned at Ivan's voice and began to talk. Juliet had a chronic respiratory illness, a lingering effect of tuberculosis. To find a milder climate, her parents had moved her from England to the Caribbean and South Africa in her childhood. Just a few years before moving to New Zealand, she had never had any friends, much like Ivan. The two quickly bonded over their shared experiences. Coincidentally, their parents had even worked at Canterbury University. While Ivan's parents were administrative staff, Juliet's father was the university principal. Though the families differed in status, this didn't hinder the two girls' friendship. Their friendship grew so strong that being apart for even a moment felt unbearable. Juliet's parents were delighted to see their daughter finally have a close friend, so every summer they invited Ivan to stay. Despite their health-limiting outdoor activities, they both enjoyed writing stories, particularly ones where they imagined themselves as the main characters. For example, in their stories, Ivan became Gina, and Juliet became Deborah. They shared a dream: to someday make it to Hollywood as screenwriters or actors. At the time, this dream seemed like a joke to others, but surprisingly, within a few decades, the two girls would go on to achieve their dreams, though in a slightly different form. But that's a story for another time. Sadness followed them. The two families held very different attitudes toward the girls' dreams. Juliet's parents were open-minded, supporting anything their daughter liked, while Ivan's parents were more authoritarian. However, ever since she befriended Juliet, Ivan had become more outgoing, even doing things she'd never done before, like greeting and chatting with neighbors. This change led her parents to let the friendship continue without interference. But no dream lasts forever. Just as everything seemed to be going well, Juliet's family faced a crisis. In early 1954, Juliet's father, Henry, resigned due to unresolved conflicts within the school board. Shortly after, Juliet's mother left for England after a scandalous affair, while Henry, struggling with the pressure, also decided to return to London. Concerned about Juliet's health, Henry arranged for her to study in South Africa under the care of a relative. The news hit Ivan like a thunderbolt. The two girls, inseparable for years, would now be continents apart. But being a sensible child, Ivan eventually came up with an idea. She asked her mother to invite Juliet to an afternoon tea as a farewell. On June 22, 1954, Ivan, her mother, and Juliet visited a nearby park for tea and dessert. Knowing they'd soon be separated, the two girls lingered after finishing their treats and decided to take a walk. Ivan's mother agreed, but worried about the park's size, she followed them closely. About half an hour later, a serious incident occurred. The two girls returned to the tea house, out of breath and covered in blood. Agnes, the shopkeeper, asked what happened, and Ivan explained that her mother had fallen on a narrow path, hitting her head. When Agnes went to investigate, she found a gruesome scene that didn't align with Ivan's explanation. Ivan's mother, Harona, was dead, her body battered with 45 distinct wounds. This, Agnes felt, was no mere accident. By 5 p.m., the Christchurch police chief and medical team arrived. With a quick examination, the doctor suggested calling forensics, implying two things. First, Harona was dead, and second, this was not a simple accident. After further investigation, the case was classified as a homicide. Ivan and Juliet, the only ones present, became the primary suspects. However, the police chief harbored doubts based on three factors. First, most acquaintances described the girls as timid and gentle. Second, there was no sign of a conflict between Ivan and her mother. Third, neither girl carried anything that could have inflicted such injuries, and both girls' statements suggested Harona had fallen down a steep, thorny path. Further probing revealed that Ivan had been taken for a psychological evaluation months earlier. The results hinted at a potential romantic relationship between the two girls, a matter treated as serious at the time. While this might not concern us today, in the 1950s New Zealand and other parts of the world, homosexuality was viewed as a psychological disorder, even leading to institutionalization. Did Harona learn about her daughter's relationship and disapprove, prompting the girls to plot her death? The police's investigation continued, casting a shadow over a tragic friendship and the dreams of two young girls. The curtain of tragedy. As investigator Mack delved deeper into this line of inquiry, an officer guarding the crime scene made a shocking discovery. After a meticulous search, the officer found a pair of long nylon stockings smeared with fresh red blood in a secluded area of the forest nearby. The issue wasn't just the stockings themselves, but the stones surrounding them, which were stained with blood, identical to the stains on the stockings. If one were to place those stones inside the stockings, they would create a highly effective deadly weapon comparable to a heavy club. Without hesitation, the police summoned two 17-year-old girls for questioning and requested warrants to search their homes. Investigators ultimately found a diary and a collection of novels that Ivan and Juliet had co-authored at Ivan's home. Though both girls had previously mentioned their writings, neither of their families had taken much interest in what they'd been writing. In their fictional world, the girls had imagined a parallel dimension called the Fourth World and referred to it casually as their paradise. They even invented a religion that resembled worship. Initially, when the police discovered these writings, they were suspicious, wondering if the two girls had been influenced by a cult. But when they opened Ivan's diary, suspicion turned into horror. The diary revealed that June 22nd was a day of joy, a day that also happened to be the date of Ivan's mother, Harona's, death. The more they flipped through the pages, the more chills ran down the officers' spines. On June 21st, Juliet had called Ivan, suggesting they use stones in the stockings instead of sand, as they'd previously planned. Ivan, thrilled, saw this as an exciting twist, like planning a surprise party. Thus, the following day, the diary entry coincided with her mother's death. A chilling note read that on June 20th, Ivan and Veronica had begun plotting Harona's murder, with Ivan showing no trace of remorse. Another entry, dated April 28th, expressed Ivan's hatred for her mother, calling her an obstacle to her personal growth and declaring that life would be so much easier without her. This was no ordinary diary, it was a comprehensive crime plan. After reading it, the police had ample evidence to bring both girls to trial. Faced with the mounting evidence, neither Juliet nor Ivan could deny their brutal scheme any longer, and they confessed in full. On the day of the murder, after afternoon tea, the two lured Harona to a quiet road under the pretense of taking a walk. Juliet went ahead to discreetly scatter pink pebbles on the path, while Ivan asked her mother to pick up the stones. As soon as Harona bent her head slightly, the brutal attack began. The girls used everything they'd prepared beforehand to assault the victim relentlessly. However, regarding motive, both denied having any special bond. According to Ivan, she had wanted to join Juliet on a trip to South Africa, but had been forbidden by her mother, who reminded her that the family's finances couldn't support such a journey, and that, given her age, Ivan was still too young to be on her own. This, Ivan said, sparked her hatred toward her mother, and ultimately led her to plan the murder. One could imagine the outrage that erupted when the case was reported in the media. The Christian community in New Zealand was especially furious, and soon this anger spread nationwide, with headlines flooding newspapers. Some even called the two girls the most repulsive individuals in New Zealand's history. Unforeseen consequences. In August 1954, 2 months after the murder, the trial of Ivan and Juliet for Harona's murder commenced at the Christchurch court. With ample evidence, one might think this case would be swiftly concluded. However, that was far from reality. The strangest part was only beginning. As the saying goes, when in doubt, seek a psychiatrist. The defense team knew this well, and so defense attorney Brian McClellan suggested from the start that Ivan and Juliet should not face a regular criminal trial, but be sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. To support this argument, he called upon two psychiatric experts, Reginald Medlicott and Francis Bennett, to testify. Both experts explained to the jury that Ivan and Juliet suffered from severe mental disorders. Ivan, they said, was afflicted with psychosis, self-loathing delusions, and hallucinations. Juliet, likewise, was no exception. She had developed psychological trauma as a child after witnessing a German air raid on London and had continued to struggle with mental health issues ever since. However, the most dramatic moment of the trial came when both girls testified. They calmly declared they were innocent, explaining that they were living in another world, a world of their own creation, where they followed the rules of this alternate reality. In that world, they argued, they had the right to kill Harona. Their testimony aligned with the psychiatrist's evaluations of their disturbed mental states. But this defense angered the court, and after a 2.5-hour deliberation, a verdict was reached. On August 28, 1954, the court convicted both Ivan and Juliet of murder. Because they were minors, however, the sentence was only 10 years, divided between the two girls. Even upon hearing the sentence, neither of them displayed fear or sadness. A reporter present at the trial recalled Ivan whispering to Juliet, and the two shared a laugh. Ivan was sent to Papakura Prison near Christchurch, while Juliet was sent to Eden Mount Prison in Auckland, later transferred to a facility in Wellington. Somehow, both were released earlier than expected. Upon their release, they immediately left New Zealand. Ivan eventually relocated to Kent, where she changed her name to Hilary Nelson and opened a riding school for children, later converting to Catholicism. Juliet's story took an even stranger turn. After some time in England, she moved to Port Mahomet, Scotland, where she published a detective series under the pen name Annie Perry. The series gained fame, won over 30 prestigious awards, and Juliet was even invited to Hollywood to discuss film adaptations. Few knew that behind the pen name Annie Perry was Juliet, the same girl who had committed the horrific crime with Ivan. In 1994, this truth was finally revealed online, but after 40 years, the case no longer held much sway over public opinion. Ironically, the revelation only elevated her fame. Even well-known directors like Peter Jackson later drew inspiration from the case to create films, including Heavenly Creatures, which was nominated for an Oscar. In the film, Juliet and Ivan were depicted as a lesbian couple. Juliet later clarified in a media interview that no such relationship existed between them, despite widespread public fascination with the notion. This brings the case to a close. Reflecting on it has left my mind somewhat unsettled. Initially, I never imagined that two young girls, still minors, could commit such an appalling crime. Had they never met, I wonder, might things have turned out differently? What do you think? Please leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.